In 1815, Napoleon escaped from his exile on the Isle of Elba, heading for mainland France. Once he'd landed, the nation was soon back on his side. He did not wait long to face his enemies again, and moved his army to Belgium to face the British and Prussian armies assembled there. On June 16th, he faced the Prussian in Ligny, forcing them to retreat, but his victory was not decisive since the Prussian army was beaten but not broken. The final confrontation was to take place 2 days later, on June 18th, 1815, near the village of Waterloo. When Napoleon rode alongside his troops on horseback, he aroused an enthusiasm among his soldiers. Another army was there, deployed along a ridge and waiting for the French frontal attack. The commander-in-chief was the Duke of Wellington, and he had under his orders contingents from Britain, Netherlands, Saxe-Weimar, Brunswick and Hanover. Napoleon gave order to his artillery to open fire against the Allied line at 11:30, when the ground had slightly dried out from the heavy rain that had fallen during the night, which had turned the area into a muddy quagmire. Then Sir Uxbridge, commander of the heavy cavalry brigades, launched his troopers in a charge which reached the French batteries, only to be met briskly and sent back by 19 squadrons of the French Guards light cavalry. Right of Wellington's line, a very hard fight for Hougoumont Farm was going on, with waves after waves of French infantry being beaten back by the light companies of the British foot guard who were defending the position. Many charges hit the Allied forces, who were drawn up in square formation, while 15,000 cavalrymen, Cuirassiers, Carabiniers, Dragoons, Chasseurs and Lanciers kept circling around them, unable to break through. In the meantime, the hard fight for the key position of La Haye-Sainte Farm in the centre went on, until the French managed to capture the place. Soon after, though, the Prussian army appeared and attacked the French army's right flank. Napoleon was unable to recall Ney and get his support. The old guard was broken and forced back before Napoleon realised the day was lost and abandoned the field, heading for Paris. The Duke of Wellington and Maréchal Bichat had met at the Belle Alliance farm as winners. I reenact Jean Roche-Poignet, an officer of the 1st Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Regiment of Grenadiers of the Old Guard. Grenadiers of the Guard, first called Consular Guard, and from 1805 on... Grenadiers of the Guard, first called Consular Guard, and from 1805 onwards, Imperial Guard, followed the same tradition started in the Middle Ages by the knights and then passed down through the musketeers and the Guard of the Kings of France. Our regiment fought in the battles of Montebello and Marengo in the Second Italian Campaign, losing half his effectiveness as casualties. At the beginning of his guard, Captain Coignet was a private in the infantry of the line, but distinguished himself for his deeds of courage. He saved the life of his own captain several times, getting first a preciously engraved weapon, the Arms of Honour, then the Order of the Legion of Honour, and the possibility to join the Imperial Guard. Captain Coignier's diaries are very important historical documents, since it's one of the few recollections from a soldier of the Imperial Guard which took part in many of Napoleon's principal campaigns. He talks about the defeat at Waterloo, where the corps of Marshal Grouchy did not show up on the battlefield of Waterloo, as well as about the victory at Marinego, where the corps of Marshal Desaix returned in time to turn defeat. Coignier had a long service in the 1st Battalion of the Imperial Guard, where he served from 1803 to 1815. After the Russian campaign, he won a field commission, becoming officer in the regiment, where he had served as a private for many years. In the 1815 campaign, Coignier was part of the general staff, so he spent the night before Waterloo at Les Cailloux Farm. He can be spotted in the famous painting standing behind the Emperor. I'm sure throughout the campaign he thought of his comrades in arms from the 1st Regiment of Foot Grenadiers, with whom he fought in Italy, near Moscow, Spain and Poland. I have participated in almost all reenactments from the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution in 1989 down to all the campaigns of the Republic, the Consulate and the Empire. The Waterloo Bicentenary is important too, because Coignier was here, but it is a French defeat nevertheless. The other bicentenaries have been more close to my heart, since they marked the French victories. Even as a defeat, Waterloo is an important episode in Napoleon's career, having contributed to build his myth as well as his victories have done, and the interest in this bicentenary is the proof. One of the most interesting places to visit on the battlefield is the Lion's Mound, dedicated to the Prince of Orange. Nearby, there's the Visitors Centre, where a painting panorama of the Battle of Waterloo can be admired. From the Lion Mound, there is a splendid view of the entire battlefield. The new Museum of the Battle, which has a collection covering all forces involved, is very close. I reenact a trooper of the 7th Regiment of Cuirassiers, an elite heavy cavalry regiment already existing before the French Revolution. In the ancient regime, the regiment was known as Royal Foreign Regiment, consisted of foreigners only. After the Revolution, it was transformed into the 7th Regiment of Cuirassiers. Our regiment took part in almost all Napoleon's campaigns, fighting at Wagram and Aspern-Essling, in the Russian campaign and Waterloo. In the crossing of the Berezina, the 7th Cuirassiers Regiment was crucial to save the French army from total disaster. Cuirassiers had steel breastplate and steel helmets, embellished with a tail of horsehair. Their task was to break through the enemy line, punching holes that their infantry could then exploit. During the Battle of Waterloo, The cuirassiers repeatedly charged the enemy squares, but could not break the British formations, because they were fired at from all sides, and kept away by the hedges of bayonets all along the square's sides. A cuirassier's breastplate gave him good protection from bullets fired from medium to long distance. The French army had units of cuirassiers until the beginning of World War I. The dragoons had helmets as the cuirassiers, but no breastplates, and were used as light cavalry, but they could also fight as infantry. When I started to reenact, I was in an infantry unit, but later many friends started to try the cavalry, and I went along. There were some problems in the beginning, since heavy cavalry requires a different approach. The reenactment of the Battle of Ligny, we stand for the Imperial Guard. The fire from enemy artillery and infantry will later be on us, so in the beginning we'll mainly be fighting enemy cavalry. We sleep in tents, which at the time were not so common. I think that in a reenactment we won't ever be able to experience in depth what the soldiers actually felt at the time, since for us the only thing to worry about is falling from the horse. Anyway, in a reenactment there's lots of excitement, and I'm very happy with what we do. The most famous units of the British cavalry were the 2nd Royal North British Dragoons, the Scottish Greys. Other distinguished units were the 7th Queen Own Hussars and the 10th Prince of Wales Hussars.
This is the 42nd, the Royal Highland Regiment, Black Watch. It's the most senior Highland regiment of the British Army, and this is the uniform the Black Watch soldiers were wearing at the time of the Battle of Waterloo. It's composed of the traditional red coat combined with a kilt and a specific headdress, which is the Highland bonnet. The Black Watch was not very active on the day of the Battle of Waterloo. For one good reason: they were heavily beaten and mauled at Quatre Bras 2 days before. It was one of the units who was responsible for holding the French for the whole day and saving the day for the British to be ready to face the French at Waterloo. Wellington was well aware of that and placed the 42nd on his extreme left in a position quite far from the heat of the battle. That meant for the Black Watch on the day to Waterloo to basically sit and wait until the final advance towards 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. But we have checked all the regimental roles, and we have discovered that the actual fighting force of the regiment was more than halved after Quatre Bras. And even the commanding officer, Colonel Macara, was killed at Quatre Bras by the French lancers. This is quite a very ungentlemanly act that was made by the French, since Colonel Macara was already wounded during the fight, and he was lying down in the field while the lancers drove him down with the lances. Even if the Black Watch was not so heavily involved in the fighting of Waterloo, Wellington was quite aware of the importance the regiment played in the entire campaign. And the Black Watch, together with another Highland Regiment, the Gordons Highlanders, have been the two Highland regiments which were cited by the Duke in his official dispatch, which was sent to England immediately after the battle as a report and published in the London Gazette on the, I'm not sure if it was 19th or 20th June, that means 1 or 2 days after the actual battle. So, apart from that, the Black Watch was also quite prominent in the following phases of the campaign, which many people ignore. After the Battle of Waterloo, a pursuit followed, with the French retreating towards France and the Prussians and Allied following up. This kept on for probably more than a week until the final surrender was formalized. Then the Black Watch was present in Paris for the so-called occupation of the French capital, and that period is quite in detail documented by many French prints and portraits, since it looks like the Highlanders in Paris were very popular with both the populations and the ladies. We are a group of Italian reenactors in Scottish uniform. The Black Watch is a multinational unit with people coming from different nations. We have the British, but we also have the Italians, us, people from Spain, people from Germany, people from Malta, people from Gibraltar, and here in Waterloo we've been joined by our fellow members from the United States of America, and Australia as well. That's simply because the Black Watch and, generally speaking, the Highlander units are very popular worldwide. It's a very specific kind of thing being a Highland regiment. It's different compared to English line regiment. There's a sort of special appeal with people from different nationalities, and it's probably connected with the Scottish culture and the Scottish history as well. As far as the Italians, many come from previous reenacting experiences with French units, but they wanted to try something different, but they didn't want to do English soldiers.
A very interesting place is Le Caillou Farm, the building where Napoleon spent the night before the battle. Of great interest is Hougoumont Farm, where the garden's walls were used as cover by the British Guardsmen to fire upon the incoming French. In the farmyard, the little chapel, which partly survived the fires raging during the battle, still stands out. The farm of Papillon is also the theatre of heavy fighting and can be admired today, as can Les Haisontais Farm, still virtually unchanged. All over the battlefield there are many monuments, plaques and memorials commemorating the various forces involved. I am a member of the 1st Regiment of Imperial Guard's Chasseurs à Cheval, created by Napoleon himself when he came to power. The Guard consisted not only of cavalry units, but also infantry and artillery ones. Normally, a cavalry regiment was composed of 4 squadrons, but our regiment had 8 squadrons, including the 2 forming Napoleon's Guard of Honour. The Guard's troopers were enlisted from wealthy young men with riding experience. Once in the army, they were trained and equipped for war. Normally during battle, a full squadron was on duty as Napoleon's personal guard. At the reenactment of Ligny battle, Napoleon had only 3 troopers escorting him. On campaign, the main task for our unit was to ride ahead, recognizing the enemy and to form a screen protecting our force's main body, while keeping the enemy under watch. These men were also supposed to estimate their strength and spot suitable places for battle. I began riding when I was in my 20s and trained in a riding school with the 4th Dutch Cuirassiers Regiment. I started with them, but for the last 4 years I've been doing the French Imperial Guard. My uniform includes the dolman with full braid and the characteristic shako. Waterloo's 200th anniversary is, of course, very important to me, since I like all military history, but have a special interest in the Napoleonic period. I took part in the Leipzig bicentenary as well. In the coming years, I plan to take part in many more Napoleonic events. In Plancenoit, where the French Young Guard fought the Prussians, the monument to the Prussian soldiers stands close to the one dedicated to the Young Guard, led by General Count Duhem, whose grave is in Genappe. In Mont-Saint-Jean, near the former military hospital, the Wounded Eagle monument commemorates the Old Guard, with a plaque dedicated to the Polish officers who fought in the battles. We find the Wellington Museum, in the same building where the Duke slept before the battle. In Quatre-Bras, there is the monument to William of Brunswick, the Black Prince, marking the place where he was mortally wounded. The prince had fought Napoleon in Leipzig and in the peninsula, and his troops wore characteristic black uniforms. To raise his army, he had to pawn the city of Oleśnica in the Lower Silesia, which today belongs to Poland.
We are from the East Norfolk Militia. We were formed in 1995. At the Battle of Waterloo, we had a small section of men that attended the battle and were attached to the 44th Regiment of Foot. They fought along the battle, and to my knowledge, we had no casualties. We were very, very lucky. The East Norfolk Militia were attached to the 44th, and we were in the 2nd Division, and we fought in the orchard, defending the walls and the orchard and the farm. Apparently a very, very vicious battle. Many, many people died. Very fortunate, as far as I'm aware, that we lost no people of our small detachment that was attached to the 44th. So this year's reenactment, we've been building up to this for about a year. We've started off training in our individual regiments, and then in companies, then in battalions, and then divisional. So we had lots and lots of people. Our role will be in the 2nd Division, and we'll be defending one of the buildings in the reenactment this evening. This is a very, very important commemoration of the Battle of Waterloo. We held a parade. We held a parade yesterday to commemorate the battle. For the British people, it means a lot that we keep this in our history, because it was a turning point in the British history that we won this battle. Okay, so I joined the reenactment 6 years ago. I was at a festival, a maritime festival in Great Yarmouth, and my brother-in-law took a fancy to doing reenactments because he saw the East Norfolk Militia, which is represented behind me, doing an enactment at the festival, and he went and he got recruited, and I said foolishly that I would go and support him. So we went off to the commanding officer's house, and suddenly we had uniform thrown at us. I had no intention of doing reenacting whatsoever. And anyway, the uniform went on, and the next thing I know, I was marching out to open a fete. So I quite enjoyed it, so I stayed with it. It was absolutely marvellous. All reenactors are very, very passionate and knowledgeable as far as they can be of their trade. So it's an absolutely fantastic and passionate thing that we do. The uniform, we have a shako with the cap badge of King George. The uniform is bright red traditionally for British. We have a white cross belts. Each regiment will have their own insignia carved into a breastplate, which is in the middle, which is unfortunately a bit of a target. The yellow represents Norfolk, okay, and these chevrons here represent 4 for a sergeant major. This sword is an original sword from 1797. It was actually at the Battle of Waterloo, so I'm very honoured that I've been allowed to carry this to Waterloo, to this reenactment. So it's a very, very sacred piece of equipment for our regiment.
The battle fought at Havre on June 19th had no consequences since Napoleon's fate had been sealed at Waterloo. He reached Paris only to abdicate and be made captive by the British, who put him on board the Bellerophon and sailed him in exile to Santa Helena, where he died 6 years later. The Napoleonic era finally ended.